All right, hello. Keith Caesar here at the Bermuda Archives. We wanted to develop a podcast that takes a look at some of Bermuda's creative people and those who were doing creative stuff today and those who were doing it back in the day. So today on our very first podcast, we have Nhuri Bashir. Nhuri is an excellent, I can't talk too much about how I feel, seeing his images and watching his growth from when I first met him, and now he's just grown into this, this really excellent photographer who we all, I hope every photographer out there will agree. We've learned so much from him and his insight into doing the business that is photography today here in Bermuda. So, Nhuri, welcome.
Wow, thank you. That's a really good intro, and I appreciate that.
Yeah. Why I actually here for this podcast was because we at the archives, we have a lot of pictures that span Bermuda's history, from the 1850s when pretty much photography came to the island.
Just began, yeah.
Till now. And today, photography is such a big part of what makes up a lot of people's lives.
Everyone's life now.
Because if you imagine back in the day, people used to have these big boxes to take pictures. Now we've got them in our pockets. We got it. Everywhere we go, we find images and we're taking them, and it's part of our culture. I want to start with you. How did photography find you?
I think that's a good way of positioning it. I think photography did find me more so than me finding it. I used to be in a band back in the day in university, and as a part of being in a band, you have to have images of yourself and make sure that you got good representation or whatnot. So I think the first interaction with cameras came way back then when we were trying to promote ourselves as a viable band.
Right. What kind of music was it?
Well, it was what you call fusion, hip hop, reggae, rock.
Right.
Nowadays, that might sound like pure gibberish, but we had a really good time. We were award nominated in Canada for the East Coast Music Awards back then, which was a pretty big thing. And so I've always had a creative streak. So love music, love the arts, love photography. And so creating images was always a part of my life. Never took it serious in terms of being a professional photographer, but it was something that I was always keen and interested in. And then when I got into the corporate world, did my degree or whatnot, and I followed the same path as everyone else. I ended up working in the bank, working in law firms or whatnot. Instagram popped up, and it became like a platform to me when I first started on Instagram. It was almost like a website or a portfolio page that you could share images with.
Right.
And so early out, when Instagram was just basically like a beta, I joined and started putting up images, and then obviously you start getting likes and people enjoying your work or whatnot. And then I developed a little bit of a website, and also I had created a group at that time called iGirls Bermuda, which was a group of people that we all went out and we did photo walks. So there was like 10, 15 of us, and we would all go out and take photos. And that became quite popular. And so from then on, I just never put down a camera. And then when I was 30 years old, I decided, I was working at HSBC, and I decided that I wanted to kind of embark on my own path.
Right.
And at that same time, I was talking with Andrew Kirkpatrick, who's my business partner now. And he's like, look, Nhuri, you pick up with a camera. I'm good on the film side of things. Let's just forge a path and work together. And literally at 30 years old, I left the bank with a camera and a dream and a wife that supported me. I always have to put that in there because that's an important part.
Yeah.
And started taking pictures, and now this is where we're at. The rest is history.
The rest is history.
Archived.
So as a child, were you always curious?
Always.
Like how was it? Because I know sometimes when you think of images and photography, sometimes you don't realize that it was a point in your life that you may have come across something that has led you to what you're doing today. Did you have any of those moments in your life?
So for me as a child, and I think of things more so as like you have a creative part of your brain, then you have like a practical part of your brain, like mathematical or whatnot. I've always erred more on the creative side of things than on the practical side of things, right. if that makes any sense. So when I was in primary school, I was always a good artist. I took art for GCSE, and then I did art as it's not AP, but it's the AP equivalent in Salters or whatnot. I was never the best of all of the bunch. There was always ones that were more naturally talented or whatnot, but I always loved it and had that as a part of my life. So in terms of having a vision or having like a creative streak, I would say that it's always been there. I've always loved aesthetics and loved to see beautiful things. I've always loved art.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. When did you take your first shot? When was it that really hooked you on the photography hand?
So, first shot, I cannot remember to save the life of me because it's with the amount of images that I've taken now to turn it back to the first shot, because you got to remember, like the process of creating images has changed so much, right? Back in the day, we used to get the little disposable cameras, and that's what we used to be able to create our images, and so that was just how it was. And then you start to get into the digital space or whatnot. Then, so for me, I look at things more so in terms of when I started to take professional shots, so when I got to a point where people looked at the work and were like, I would like to pay you for that. And that was at the age of 30. It was like right out the bat, leaving HSBC. Within the first 2 months or so, I had sold my first set of images or done work in photography space.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. And what was your first camera?
So my first camera was a D7000.
Okay, so Nikon. There you go.
Yeah.
Part of the right religion.
Yeah. I would subscribe to that religion, I think Nikon, to me, beautiful imagery, great cameras, ergonomics is great. I'm not sure how technical this is supposed to be. Right. But for me, I mean, it was the perfect start in camera.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's just go into a second and just introduce you to the other half of this story, because again, you've never heard of Clive Saunders, or you may have heard of him, but you don't.
The first time I've heard the name was when you called me, and I purposefully did not research it, just because I wanted it to be fresh when we came here. So I have no knowledge of Clive or his work, and that he was even a photographer outside of you telling me.
Right. So Clive Saunders was born in Bermuda in 1922. So he was here, earlier on, very early on, and he basically was his parents, when he was around 8, they up and they left, went to the U.S. So he lived in the U.S. for a few years, and then World War II breaks out. So his parents came back to Bermuda, and it was around that time that he started getting into photography. So I could imagine he was like a lot of us, just going around. And his times were different from our times.
Well, war.
So war, yeah.
That's a big difference.
So he basically was around taking pictures, and he came back, and one thing he did do was he tried to work for the Bermuda Trade Board.
Okay.
Or he applied for it. And at that time, we know the politics of what Bermuda was at that time.
Yeah, it was segregated.
He didn't get the job. And so he was left wondering about photography. He had this zeal for it, this excitement. He wanted to do it. But when he applied for the job, he didn't get his job. So eventually he started working for a photographer named David Knudsen.
Okay.
And this gentleman owned a business on Queen Street, right up by where the library is. And funny enough, do you remember Stewards? on Reed Street?
I do remember Stewart's, yeah.
So Stewart's on Reed Street was the store where they all, that was his store, basically, that his family took over. So Clive went there, he worked for a few years, and he started learning the process of photography.
Mm-hmm.
This led to him also going to work for Bermuda Police Service. But he wasn't there long. And it was funny for me, as I was doing some work back in the archives, I stumbled on some old photographs. I was just like, from a specific event that happened. And I was like, this is by Clive Saunders, you know?
Yeah.
I'm like not connecting it. But
Right.
then I was like, oh, snap.
Yeah.
Clive Saunders took these pictures, which...
So was he there in the capacity as a police officer, or was he like forensics, or what was he at the time?
He was, I think, police photographer.
Gotcha.
So Knudsen had a little hustle where I guess the people, Knudsen and whoever worked with him, would go and take images of crime scenes.
Yeah.
So he was working on that angle.
Yeah.
But for this particular case, it was just like, I was just so like shaken because I was just like, I would have never thought that he would have been doing that. Because when I learned about him, it was for inspiration. It was like, here's this gentleman who's out there doing photography. He's excelled at it. I can aspire to excel at that level, but he's from Bermuda.
Yeah.
And he's gone and done all these things. And I remember it was one image, his wife was on the cover of Ebony magazine.
Clive's wife.
Clive's wife, yeah.
Wow.
So he was working for an agency back then that dealt with more or less black magazines.
Models, yeah.
And he took a picture of her, and she's in her bathing suit on a boat off of Whale Bay. And that's a classic image right there. So
Wow.
that's what got me excited about this whole, this person, this Clive Saunders. And for whatever contacts people from Bermuda see him in or know of him in, the fact that he did it, and the fact that he, as you said, you were 30, and you were just like, I'm going to do it.
Do it.
He just went and he did it because he did not see as many opportunities there.
Mm-hmm.
And I would imagine back in those days, you would have had a whole slew of photographers that were out there working for the News Bureau, different places.
Yeah. So
having to compete to get in might have been a little bit more difficult for him at that point. But he went away and he excelled. He excelled enormously.
Wow.
It's one area. So for his sponsorship to become a U.S. national citizen, he was sponsored by Gordon Parks.
Oh, wow.
Apparently, yeah. So yeah.
So that's big.
That's
big,
huge,
right? Yeah.
So, and Gordon Parks was a successful American photographer.
One of the most inspirational photographers.
And director, filmmaker. Yeah. And to know that this gentleman from Bermuda got sponsored by him to become an American citizen, it's just like,
that's mind blowing.
It's mind blowing.
Okay, so I feel like I have a lot of work to do.
Well, what I find in his story and what I find paralleling in your story is the fact of just getting to it. Just getting to it. It's like you have a bigger thing and you see where you want your life to go. I don't know if were there any kind of, what was that moment? Because I know you said you just didn't want to do the corporate anymore. What was that moment for you?
Yeah, I think for me, there was like, my dad was an entrepreneur, right? I wouldn't put him on the creative spectrum, but he was an entrepreneur. Very, very, very brilliant man. And so I grew up in a house where, he didn't have a 9-to-5. He never, my mom never had a 9-to-5, never, and that was the way that I was raised. So my intention from childhood was always to be doing my own thing. I think what kind of allowed me to see that, I could make it in the creative realm was my initial stint in music. I saw that there was a financial way to be able to make it in the creative realm. Yeah. And so I knew that I was working my way into doing what I wanted to do. I didn't know that it was going to be photography, I can tell you that. Photography became the thing that I was good at the time, that people recognized that I was good at the time. And it became something that it was just a snowball effect. So it wasn't like when I left HSBC, I wasn't leaving HSBC with the intention that I was going to be an international photographer shooting for hotels and whatnot. Like that wasn't the intention at all. I can tell you that. Like if I showed you my original business plan leaving HSBC, you'd be like, oh no, you were shooting low. you were shooting real low. But yeah, I just knew like that the corporate world, specifically 9 to 5, working for a large corporation to generate millions of dollars for someone else was not my thing. You know, even if I have a modest living, I prefer to have a modest living and have things that I create. And you know, you have an archive here.
Yeah.
This archive is dedicated to things that people created. You know, and I love and I was talking to my nephew the other day. It's like you have to think of yourself as either consumer or creator, you know?
Right.
And so I would prefer to be a creator than a consumer, you know, even though you invariably are some subset of each other one. So for me, it was just to be able to create things that people like,
right.
You know?
Right.
And photography is that thing.
So let me just, Saunders, he worked on a few magazines. So let me just throw a few out there. He's worked with, he took images of people like Harry Kissinger,
Okay.
Leonard Bernstein, Malcolm X, Nation of Islam leader Elijah Muhammad, author James Baldwin, James Brown.
What?
And so it's just like, and a lot of his stuff now I know one catalog is at the New York Public Library. So you literally could go online and see some of his images also, right?
Wow.
And he has another one in I think Philadelphia or Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh. So
Wow.
his stuff is out there in the world. And all this again from someone who he inherently seemed like he did love the island.
Right.
But again, it gets to that point where it's just like, I can't grow.
And you can't.
Right.
I mean, I think that, you know, anyone that works professionally here in photography or in cinema video, you can grow to a certain point.
Right.
You know, but at a certain point, the client base that you're going to be working for becomes very diminished, you know? And so in order for you to be able to expand and do things, you have to have an international
base.
Yeah. You have to.
Yeah.
Or you will top out, you know, or you'll age out.
You spoke earlier about intention. How important is that? Because I was speaking with someone a few weeks ago about, you know, I was in a slump. I was like not feeling creative. And they're like, well, do you have intention for what you're doing? What is the intention? And I started looking at it like, that's such a powerful word for me. It's like, I have all this stuff. I want to be creative, or I want to do my photography, whatever, but what is my intention?
Exactly.
So how important is this word intention? How important was it for you? And how important do you think it should be for others trying to find that creative life or find that balance?
I think intention is the most important word, or the most important mantra for somebody that's a photographer, like in general. If you try to separate out, like, and you say there are photographers. I worked with this guy, really, really, really talented celebrity photographer. This guy, Anders Overgaard. Okay. Now, I was doing what they call production assistance. Production assistant means basically you do all the grunt work, right? If he drops an apple, you pick the apple up. You know what I mean? That's kind of what the production assistant is. But at the end of the day, in Bermuda, he needed somebody to be able to assist him to be able to navigate the landscape of Bermuda. Right. Now, this guy, he shot celebrity after celebrity after celebrity, and he gets paid top dollar to do it, right? And when you look at his process, and what I was lucky to be able to do is to look at his process, look at the processes of many high-paid photographers that I've worked with doing production assistance, right? So doing the grunt work, but learning the whole time, right? Is the intention that you have, right? So a lot of photographers, they take a camera, they walk out, and like, I'm gonna get something today, right? And then they come back home and like, I didn't get anything today, right? Because they didn't have a specific intention on what they were going to shoot. Now, you look at a shoot that Anders Overgaard, Annie Leibovitz, any of the top name photographers do today, there's weeks and weeks of pre-work that goes into that shoot prior to them pushing the trigger.
Right.
And so it's all intention. So your pay scale generally is directly correlated to the amount of intention that you put in the creation of each image. Mm-hmm. You see what I mean? So for him, the biggest thing that I learned was, it's not necessarily about the final product, There's a lot of photographers that if you gave them the same lighting and put all that kind of stuff, they might be able to get an image that looks very similar.
Right.
But not every photographer puts in that amount of work to be able to get that image, If that makes any sense. It's the intention. Yeah.
So we, of course, grew up, and in our time, we've been more digital. You recently, part of your work base is also film. Mm-hmm. Saunders, of course, comes from the old school, where they had to go and process their film.
Yeah.
And a lot of his learning also was that when he left Bermuda, he went away to school in New York, in America. And he basically learned the process of film. Mm-hmm. A lot of the other experiences he's had has been about learning at Life magazine.
Yeah.
Learning how to do the process.
Yeah.
What is your take on that? With film, do you want to learn the process of film, or
or do I like the aesthetic of film?
Do you like the aesthetic of film? What is it about film that excites you or makes you want to work more of that form, as opposed to digital, which is cool?
Yeah,
but it's still nothing like seeing a film.
Agreed.
Nothing like seeing film.
Agreed. I think that the thing that drew me to film was the pace. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm a person, you talk about culling images. Mm-hmm. I really don't enjoy going through 1,000 images to find the one that was good, right? And so you talk about intention again. Mm-hmm. Everything will come right back to intention, right? So with film, if you have 35 millimeter film, and you have 36 frames, to be able to shoot, then you're very intentional about whether or not you push that trigger, like to take the shot. And then even when you get into medium format, with some of the cameras, you're talking about 9 images, mm-hmm. and with my current, I get 15 images. Right. So if I only have 15 images to be able to capture a specific scene, then it has to be very intentional before I push the shutter. So I believe that for me, shooting film is not necessarily about the processing, the chemicals or whatnot. It's for me to understand what a camera is physically, because everyone talks about, and we kind of touched on it earlier, I'm a Nikon person, I'm a Sony person, I'm a Canon person, I'm a these different things. But at the end of the day, most people have no clue what's happening inside those boxes that are taking images. Right, There's a bunch of scientists that are putting a lot of information into those things, and a lot of, people that understand a lot of things, but the photographer doesn't. The photographers of today don't. So for me, I like to have something that's rudimentary, that I'm connected to the process, mm-hmm. and I don't have to speed to do anything. So I shoot with intention. And you find that carries over into your digital photography. Right. Because clients today, outside of editorial and magazine, a lot of them don't have an appreciation for film photography. Right. Right. So they want digital and they want their shots immediately. Mm-hmm. And so the process of photography, it assists in your digital work. Most people that work with me know that I'm not going to be submitting a ton of images. Right. And you're not getting 500 images. If we go for a shoot to get 50 images, we get 50 images, 51 images, 52 images. And the images are exactly what we intended to shoot. and there may be some additional things that come out of it in this pretty moment, but for the most part, I shoot with intention all the time.
Okay, cool. So Saunders eventually, he didn't come back. He died in 1987.
Okay.
And funny enough, he died just as he was about to get the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Bermuda Art Council.
Wow.
So just at the nick of it, he died. And
wow.
He had a few shares hurt. He once said in one of his articles, he said something that was really interesting to me about photography. And it's like, can you tell Bermuda story? What can you tell a story of Bermuda without using a face?
Mm-hmm.
So can you go out as a photographer right now with your camera and tell a story about Bermuda without using a face?
In one image, or how many images?
You can use a few images, but you just can't use you can't use a face.
I would say that, so I've worked on, and no one else knows about it, but maybe this is a good time to talk about it, but I've worked on a zine that doesn't have any faces in it.
Okay.
That's all Bermuda, because a lot of the work that I do is architectural, right? There's
right.
no faces.
Right.
And there's so many stories that can be told in the streets and in the buildings and in the landscapes or cityscapes or whatnot. So I believe, without having discussed it with him, that you could tell the story of a place without faces, for sure. Mm-hmm. And if you're cheeky about it, if you can get hands and feet in there, then definitely.
which is what he
of course.
Which is what he essentially did.
Yeah.
All his pictures were of hands.
Yeah, you could definitely do it. Yeah, I think I would love to see different people's approach to that, because there's so much more to photography than like portraiture and model work. When I talk about model work, a lot of people, they focus their life or their photography on taking pictures of pretty people,
Right, yeah.
And it's such a small subset of what is, at any given time you got 365 degrees of, you got a sphere around you.
Yeah.
So to focus in on one human or one specific thing, it's just an interesting choice when there's so many things to perceive and take images of.
Right. So now that we've talked a little bit about Saunders, do you feel like would you have loved to have met this cat?
See, for me,
this gentleman,
this cat, no. The thing is that for me, in how I approached it from the beginning. So Andrew and I, we did production assistant,
right?
And that to me was the thing that broke it for me. I understood it. There was a lot of things coming into photography that I didn't understand. I didn't understand how you could have somebody that gets paid so much money to take photos. Never understood that coming into photography. Mm-hmm. I never understood the process that occurred for many photographers who are acclaimed and named. Right. So working as a production assistant, I learned a lot, or I have learned a lot, because I still do it. If somebody's awesome photographer, I'll be that PA for sure. No worries. Put me in.
Because that's where you gain more experience.
Put me in.
Yeah.
Put me in. If there's somebody that's got a cool talent, put me in. I'm down for it, right? So I would have loved to just be on set to hand out ice cream or whatever they wanted back in the day. Because I love to not be... One thing that I never like is when people say, can I shadow you, right? Because it's there's no real purpose in that. Mm-hmm. If you want to help me by moving a bag, or you want to help by doing something, being productive on set, then for sure. But I would have loved to just, carry the bags around and pour the tea or pour water or whatnot and just watch the process, be a part of it, Right.
The other thing I wanted to just bring up real quick is I read an article about you, and you mentioned of how you and your business partner had a specific goal for what you wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
So you basically were not, you knew you were going to go this way, or you're trying to shoot this way.
Yeah.
Because I think we think a lot of times about images, we just think of this is basically one route that we need to go. but you found a different way. And
Yeah.
how exciting was that?
It's like you said, it's intention, right?
Yeah.
So when we kicked into it, one of the things that I would say you should do in any industry, right? Doesn't matter what industry it is. You say, who's the highest paid person that I can find in this industry, right? And just look at what they do, right? Just look at it. Compare yourself to it. You know, are you as good as them, really? You know, and really compare yourself to it. So one of the things that we noticed right off the bat was that, you know, for all of the large corporations or companies in Bermuda, whenever they did a photo shoot, whenever they did a video shoot, they brought somebody in for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, rightfully or wrongfully, you know, everyone has their opinion on it. There was a perception that the international folks were super professional, and that with some of the locals that were available for hire, that they wouldn't get the same quality of work. And so our goal was like, well, we want to be, you know, the company that these international large companies are hiring.
Right.
So we have to figure out what it is these guys are doing differently than everyone else, and that is that comes from a term that I love. If you listen to Buju Banton, right? He says, "He who seeks knowledge begins with humbleness." Right? I have no problem sweeping the floors. I have no problem flushing the toilets. I have no problem doing anything if I can learn what the people that are doing exceptional in an industry are doing. I have no problem doing any of that. Right. So the intention was always there. Just like working in the bank, that was a means to a specific end, you know, like save money so that I could do something that I wanted to do.
Okay, cool. Well, at this point, let's have a look at some of his images.
That's the best point.
Yeah, just get your take on a few of his things. So Saunders worked a lot in Africa. He worked a lot in, of course, the U.S. and Africa, where he was doing assignments. And so we have some African photos, we have some American photos here at the archives. We also have a lot of his Bermuda stuff. I want to start with the Bermuda stuff because I find it real interesting, and you'll see a pattern.
Okay.
Which I think informs what he wanted or his intention, or what he wanted to do with what he wanted to do as a photographer. I think it's very specific and it's fun. So
yeah, let's get into it, man. I'm excited. That's what we're here for, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, just leave this.
Yeah.
I'll just leave it running.
Cool.
having now seen some of his work, what appreciates you more? How does it make you appreciate it more? Or from just learning about him and now seeing it, you see an evident growth?
There is a astronomical growth between the early works and the new works. You can see the talent in the early works,
right?
But that's mastery in those last frames there, the ones in Africa. One thing that I love about his work, which is something that I appreciate more from doing architecture,
right,
is shape and form.
Yep.
And one of the things that I think that he does exceptionally that you don't see in many photographers at all is he is able to create shape out of things that don't have shape. So when I say don't have shape, I'm talking about structured shape. So there's a number of faces, and then his framing another individual within a number of faces.
Right.
So the faces become the pattern, in the background, and has created a structure out of that,
right,
which that's mastery of your craft, of just going and taking shots.
Yeah, and it's exciting to see.
I'm super inspired now. Yeah, I think my next series is gonna look a little different. That's awesome.
But like him, you've been foreign. You've been to
I've been to a number of places. I was in St. Lucia.
St. Lucia, yeah.
Yeah, I was in Puerto Rico recently. I obviously done some stuff down in Barbados. So just expanding out as much as possible, right?
Right, and having that intention to find another way or something new, having an adventure.
To me, it's all everything in life is about expanding on the human experience, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I've experienced certain things, and I'd like to experience new things.
Right.
I don't want to experience the exact same things over and over and over and over and over. So again, with what I saw there from his work, it's when you are experiencing things, also approaching it from a more professional standpoint. You know what I mean? Or an improved process. And you can see that progression in his work. And I could only aspire to capture images like that,
Someday.
Yeah.
Someday.
Yeah.
All right, Nhuri Bashir, thank you for being our very first guest here on our podcast at the Bermuda Archives. And we only just touched a little bit of
tip of the iceberg.
Tip of the iceberg of what he did, but it's definitely, from my opinion, Saunders is definitely an inspiration. If you're serious about photography, you should know the people that came before.
For sure.
And this is not just somebody that was a Bermuda photographer. He was an international photographer.
Yeah.
And he had the same, I'm sure he had, coming up with the civil rights era, he was around with all of that. But you see how his work grew.
Yeah.
And he essentially left the island and became this big photographer. And his name is known to people who search for it.
Right.
But his work, and like I see with your work, it just grows and it's getting better. It's becoming like a fine wine. It's like, what will they do
aged
next?
in time.
How will it look? And maybe someday we'll see some of your work here at the archives.
Yeah.
Should you consider us to have a place for your work eventually?
Yeah, I mean, one, thank you very much for having me here.
Yeah.
I think that, I study a lot of photographers.
Yeah.
But I've never considered studying the Bermudian photographers of the past.
Right.
And I'm in awe. I want to come back down here and do round two, because that's stunning.
It's stunning.
And specifically as a young black photographer, to see that, you're kind of standing on the shoulders of people that came before you, and sometimes you're standing on someone's shoulders and you didn't even know that you're standing on their shoulders.
Right.
Yeah. And in this scenario, that's exactly it. You have people that paved the path for you to be able to do specific things.
Right.
And, they struggled things that you never had to struggle, and so I appreciate you bringing me down here and having me be a part of this.
All right, cool.
Yeah, man.
All right, thank you, and we'll see you on the next podcast.
Thank you.